All right, guys. So welcome to the podcast. Today we have Steve Beattie. He's a Wim Hof certified coach. He's been working with the cold and nature and healing for quite a long time. Very glad to have you on the podcast today. Thank you so much, Steve. Welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Perfect, perfect. Okay, cool. So I guess we'll just kick it off. If you want to just give us a little bit of your backstory and how you kind of got to where you are today. I'm sure it's been, quite a challenge or struggle, but you got here. So if you can just kind of kick it off and yeah, give
Yeah,
us a little about yourself.
yeah. I got here by not aiming to be here. Just realizing that life is a journey, and on we go. It just keeps going and going and going. But that's more of a recent realization. I got into the Wim Hof method a long time ago, 11 years ago. I got into the Wim Hof method because of a physical illness that I had through all my life really, but through my 20s, and then it really became much worse in my 30s. I was developing these inflammation problems in my body, pain, skin conditions, digestive issues, getting worse and worse and worse. And in my early 40s, it got really bad, and I was in hospital, and I thought I was going to die. It was rock bottom, and I went through all this testing to see what was wrong with me, and they gave me a diagnosis. Sort of anyway. They said I have it's. Doctor actually said it's as if you have non-specific rheumatoid arthritis,
Okay.
which isn't a thing. For any doctors out there
Exactly.
listening, that's not a thing. People going through their medical textbook. What is that? That's not a thing.
Here, take some Advil and you'll be good,
Yeah,
right?
well, it wasn't the Advil they offered. It was very,
Okay.
very serious steroid drugs, which
Wow.
was going to be the treatment for this. Which I wouldn't be here today if I had done that. It would have the side effects of these drugs are profound. And I'm not anti-medicine, anti-drug by any means at all. But if you have a chronic disease and you just try and treat that with chronic use of medication without looking at the root of where this disease came from, you're going to die anyway.
Yeah.
So I wanted to find out why. And one of the things I discovered right away, a friend of mine at work had, pointed me towards the Wim Hof method, because this Wim Hof method was showing really positive results. And this was, 10, 11 years ago, really positive results for people with inflammation, which is what I had. So I began this practice of doing the breath work, and the cold showers. And immediately, the very first time I did the breath practice, it wasn't like it got a little better over time. It was like I was better
Wow.
that
That's
first time, like
crazy.
15 minutes of breath work.
Wow.
All this aching. I wasn't in an acute state at that time, but I was just accustomed to being stiff and achy and not feeling well. 15 minutes of breath work,
Wow.
gone,
That's crazy.
gone. Yeah.
Wow.
And so that became a lifestyle. I did breath work and cold showers every day. I started going down to the lake in Toronto 10 years ago, in January. Now, you go down there now at any time. There's groups of people all over the place doing cold exposure, which is
Yeah.
amazing. Wim
Yeah.
Hof has put cold exposure and breath work on the map. He has
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
saved millions of people, probably. You know,
Of course. Yeah.
um, I was the only one down there. I was this one crazy guy going down to the lake and doing my
Yeah.
cold dips and stuff. And that just progressed. And I became an instructor a few years later. I was already an instructor in the health and fitness industry, and I thought, this is better than anything else I'm teaching. I want to teach the Wim Hof method, and
Mhm.
discovered that there was a way to become an instructor. But up to this time, I was just using the Wim Hof method to regulate my conditions, to alleviate my symptoms. I wasn't curing anything. It was just my drug that
Mhm.
was alleviating the symptoms. Part of becoming an instructor, I had to do a 2-day course down in California, the advanced course. And on the second day of that, we did this really long breath sessions, about 90 minutes. And I was vibrating. All
Wow.
the stuff you're not supposed to do. Like I was in tetany, my face was puckered up, I was going to lockdown. Stuff you don't do. We
Crazy.
don't do that in the Wim Hof method.
No.
But I was everything was just all tightening up, and then I had this like weird release, and I had to push everything down and compose myself afterwards. And it was really, really unpleasant for me. And about 6 weeks after that, I'm in Australia, which is where I'm going tomorrow. It's connected. And for this 5-day Wim Hof Masters module. And it was in that where we were told to meditate on our blockage. And I didn't really understand what that was. I just wanted to become an instructor. But on the last day of that, day 5, again, we did this long breath practice. This thing about the breath.
Hmm.
We were breathing and breathing and breathing again for 90 minutes and long future self meditation. And again, I was feeling this unease rising up inside of me. And then I went into the ice bath, and, everybody's had an ice bath now. Everybody does breath work now.
Yeah,
Everybody knows
exactly.
what it's
Yeah.
like. It's like, oh my God, this so you lose your breath. It's that gasp, and you're stuck, and
Hmm.
you have to like try and breathe out, and you suck air back in, and it's a
Hmm.
challenge. And you find your breath. And it's in that moment that I found my breath that I also found me.
Hmm.
And I hadn't known me for over 30 years. And I broke down and I cried.
Wow.
And not just sobbing, I just
Yeah, you
bawled my eyes
belted,
out. Just,
let it
it
out.
came out, like,
Yeah,
laughing and crying at the same time in this ice bath. And I composed myself and I got out. And my good friend, who I'm seeing in Australia, Asher, um, he saw the whole thing. He put his
crazy.
arm around me and said, "Are you okay, brother?" And just that act of him, of that concern, that care of him putting his arm around me, my legs gave out. I collapsed.
Wow.
And I just wailed for 3 hours, just bawled my eyes out
Wow.
for the first time in
That's
32
crazy.
years, just let it all out. And that
Yeah.
was that was the driver of my disease. It was this repression of emotions. I was completely flat. But that energy, the emotions need to come out. You need to express yourself. And because I wasn't
Hmm.
expressing myself, I wasn't expressing the pain, my emotional pain, so my body went into pain.
Okay. Hmm.
That's where chronic pain comes from.
Wow.
You can fall over and, hurt your knee, and your knee hurts. But if you just
Yeah.
start getting pain building up in your body and building up and building up and building up, and you didn't hurt yourself, but you're in pain,
Yeah.
you're hurting yourself. It's the emotional pain, it's spiritual pain, it's some sort of pain rising up, manifesting in your body.
Wow.
So
Crazy.
yeah, it was crazy. It
Wow.
was it was crazy, and
Yeah.
then that led to readdressing everything in my life. That was 6 years ago, and then
Wow.
exploring emotions, figuring out what these are, and healing in various modalities, and discovering my breath and ways to breathe and ways to relate to other people, and a spiritual awakening, connecting to something more than just me, and
Hmm.
and then surrendering to all of that and
Yeah.
seeing how life unfolds.
Awesome.
And
Cool.
so, and along that journey was all these profound ways in which we grow, we learn, we heal. The group I'm with in Australia, the Fifth Direction, it's the mythopoetic men's movement come to life. We follow myths, stories, and poetry, and it's actually all about your story.
Wow.
Your story, when you tell your story, you are releasing in the form of words, a vibration of sound. You are releasing an energy that's inside of you, and you bring it into reality. You hear your story, and it becomes your truth. And just in that knowing, just in that awareness of your truth, begins the
Yeah.
healing.
Wow.
But you have to
Crazy.
tell that story to someone,
Exactly. Kind of
right?
like this almost.
Kind of like this,
Or
but
whoever's watching this.
yeah.
Yeah.
But the big thing that happens is, 'cause I coach people in the healing realm. A
Mm.
lot of time somebody begins their healing journey, and their life doesn't make sense to them anymore. Their people don't make sense to them anymore. Their friends, their family, their colleagues, their community is gone. It just doesn't make sense. So they isolate themselves. So there's
Yeah.
no one to hear their story.
Crazy.
Yeah. So that's why we have these communities that we have. That's why we have breathing in nature and the community that we have, so that we can come together and share our stories, listen to each other, and hear ourselves.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Okay, cool. Awesome. Yeah, that's incredible story. Incredible. So yeah, I guess that kind of led you to, would you say the cold is, something you got, like you're pretty much heavily into it now with the Wim Hof method and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So that story kind of brought you to where this whole cold exposure, that sort of
Hmm.
thing. Okay.
Yeah, but I always liked the cold. Even as a little
Yeah.
boy, I loved
Yeah.
the cold.
Okay.
I've always, I've always gone winter camping. I've always enjoyed winter sports. And I was never bothered by the cold. I could go out even when I was a little kid, I had to go out and get the firewood. We lived out in the countryside and we had a wood burning stove, and I'd go out in the dead of winter with just my t-shirt on. I'd put my dad's work
Wow.
boots on and go out in just
Crazy.
shorts and a t-shirt and feel the cold snow landing on my skin and enjoying that feeling. So I was never bothered by the cold. And, in retrospect, I guess that may have been early signs of inflammation in my body. I was already
Mm.
running hot. And so
Wow.
being out in the cold felt nice. It
Yeah.
cooled me down a little bit and it allowed me to tap some of that energy. But I'd never done ice baths until I got into the Wim Hof method. That wasn't something
Yeah.
I did
Crazy.
at all. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So I guess there's probably some people listening that's like, okay, cool, Steve and Marco, and you guys are onto the cold, but like, how do I get into it? Because I know it's kind of intimidating for some people and they're just starting. And even like, they dip their toes and it's like, oh, like, just your toes and you're flipping out. So
Hmm.
do you have any advice for someone that's like starting out, maybe some of the benefits, maybe some of the science around it, and like some
Yeah.
advice for someone who's just beginning?
Yeah. So the biggest thing I hear now about ice baths, and people say, "Oh, I don't like the cold." Um, yeah, no kidding. I don't like ice baths either. They're horrible. They're really cold. You lose your breath. Your feet
Yeah.
and your fingers hurt, right? We don't do it because it's enjoyable and a nice feeling. We do it because we are facing ourselves in that moment. We are facing all of our fears, all of our anxieties, all of our stress. We're facing all of it. And we are moving through it. So we understand how we show up in the world. That's why we do it, right? Now, it has all these incredible side effects. And you can start by just having a cold shower. You don't have to go down to the lake and surrender to the cold. You can start by just having a cold shower. Have your warm shower, wash your hair, wash your body, rinse your body off, and then turn it to a little bit colder,
Yeah.
just so it's uncomfortable at first. Just that's yucky, that's cold. I don't like it. Move
Yeah.
to that point, and maybe just for 15 seconds. But the goal here isn't to fight it, isn't to suffer in the cold. Anybody can suffer in the cold.
Yeah.
We're as a species, we're pretty good at suffering. We like our suffering. We subscribe to suffering as much as possible. The goal of the cold is not to suffer, is to accept and feel the cold on your skin. Just feel it. Know what cold feels like. It's just your brain interpreting sensations, right? We have all these preconceptions of what cold is. It's dangerous, it's painful, it's horrible, it make you sick, all this stuff. But did you play in the snow when you were a kid?
Oh yeah.
That was the cold. Do you go on exciting ski trips in the mountains? That's cold. To go for
Yeah.
a romantic walk with a loved one in the dead of winter? That's cold, right? It's
Yeah.
all the same cold. It's just your interpretation of it. So if you accept that this cold is a healing modality, and that sure it's going to be unpleasant when you're up to your neck in ice water, it's unpleasant. But
Yeah.
when you frame it as this thing that's going to heal you, you can
Yeah.
move through it. And so the goal is to relax in the cold. So just start with a cold shower, just a little bit of
Okay.
cold for a few seconds. The next day, a little bit longer and a little bit longer, and try and get it down as cold as you can, and try and work out to about 2 minutes.
Mhm.
You've done it. That's all you need. 2 minutes in the cold shower, you're getting all the benefits from that. And some of the incredible benefits is you see a huge boost to your immune system.
Yeah.
Yeah, immediately. Daily
Wow.
dose of cold boosts your immune system. And that makes a lot of sense if you look at us from a paleological point of view or an archaeological
Yeah.
point of view. In the cold winter months when we had to huddle together in the cave, you better have a strong immune system. If that group
Yeah.
you had a weak immune system, you don't live till spring. You die of a cold over the winter. So you have to
Wow.
have this boost in your immune system. So the cold
Hmm.
triggers that. But because we live in such a comfortable lifestyle, it's 24 degrees Celsius all the time,
Yeah.
summer and winter, everything's regulated. People have auto
Yeah.
car starters so they can heat their
Yeah.
car up before they walk to it because they don't want to
And they're,
sit in a
yeah.
cold car for 30 seconds. And they,
Yeah.
you go into the corner store and you people put the winter parkas on in September. What,
Yeah.
what are you going to do in January when it's actually cold?
Exactly. Yeah.
But if you
Yeah.
allow your body to adapt to the changing seasons, like I'm still going and I'm walking my dog even now. It's October in Toronto. It's the mornings are 10 degrees. I go out in just my
Mhm.
t-shirt. I go out
Yeah.
barefoot, right? And at
It's
first, when you
grounding.
step,
Yeah.
yeah, and when you first step outside, it's like, whoo, that's brisk. And within seconds, it's like, that's not so bad. Your body
Yeah.
adapts. We have this
Yeah.
adaptation to create heat in our body. We have brown fat, brown adipose tissue, which generates heat. It's naturally there. All the other
Mhm.
mammals adapt to the winter as well. Why wouldn't
Yeah.
humans, right?
Yeah.
So we have this
Cool.
this technique. And so we
Sweet.
boost our immune system. When we do ice baths, we get a huge boost in dopamine, a natural
Yes.
boost. It
Yeah.
goes up by 400% and stays
Wow.
there for the day. You are just blissed out. You're happy all day long.
Wow.
It's really amazing. And a piece on the Hooverman podcast just recently about building willpower
Yeah.
by making yourself do something unpleasant boosts your willpower. So you have more willpower to do everything else. So
Yeah.
for people who are, you know, wrestling with a poor diet or wrestling with making themselves go to the gym or wrestling with, exercising or journaling or meditating or just don't have the willpower to do it, you keep failing.
Yeah.
Forcing yourself to do something difficult just once a week going into the ice builds your willpower to do all those other amazing things.
Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy. Cool. Okay, cool. Yeah. I was going through your Instagram a bit and I saw a really cool photo of you and Wim. So maybe you could just kind of tell people like how that whole thing went down and like how was it meeting him and must have
Yeah.
been pretty crazy experience.
That's actually a really funny story. So I first met Wim here in Toronto when I've been doing it for a few years, and then I thought I want to be the Wim Hof Method instructor. Did a quick search, Wim Hof instructor. He's coming to Toronto. What? And it was
Crazy.
like a month later. This was in April. It was in May. He was coming to Toronto for this big event in the Brickworks 6 years ago, I guess. 6 years ago last May. And so I signed up right away. And I'm the early guy. I show up everywhere early all the time. Get to the Brickworks like an hour early. Wim is also an early guy. He shows up places early. I go for a walk on the trails at the Brickworks here in Toronto, and Wim is going for a walk on the trails in the Brickworks. And I
That's
bump into him. I
crazy.
Wim,
Oh my
introduce
God.
myself. Yeah, and we go for a
Wow.
walk together.
Wow.
Yeah, and we're just walking.
Incredible.
Yeah, and he's just this ordinary, easygoing guy. You see him on all the YouTubes and all this, feats of power and wonderment. Um, and as soon as the camera's on him, he's like rah 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 rah, yeah yeah yeah. He's not like that. he's
Oh wow.
he is like that in that because that's the time and
Of
place for it. But
course.
in
Yeah.
person, he's just this really warm, grounded, open, friendly guy that is
Wow.
really easy to talk to. So we talked
Wow.
for a while. I got my picture taken, and a month after that picture was taken in Toronto, I'm down in California. Like this all happened really fast. Like I became a Wim
Yeah.
Hof Method instructor in 3 months. It just
Wow.
everything aligned.
Wow.
Um, I'm in
Wow.
California. A month later, he's there. Talked to him again, hanging out with him. It was a big group, so we didn't have a lot of hangout time.
Mhm.
But we're wearing the same shirts, and we get a picture taken again.
Crazy.
A month after that, we're in Australia for the master module. Wim is there, and then we had lots of that was a 5-day thing. So we were just hanging out around the fire, talking, and it was really really chill. We're wearing the
Mhm.
same shirts.
That's incredible. That's
Yeah, it's pretty
crazy.
funny.
So every picture is the same
Yeah, every
same
picture's the
shirt.
same. It's just sort of different backgrounds. They just
Yeah,
changed the screen
right.
behind us. Take another picture.
Crazy,
Yeah.
crazy. Awesome. That's cool. Incredible, man. So yeah, so I guess this kind of does lead into the masculinity kind of stuff. I've done a couple posts where the archetypes of masculine and that sort of
Hmm.
thing. But maybe you can get into your perspective because I know you have a couple different angles on your thing, especially with your mentioned Iron John.
Yeah.
There's 4 parts of healing, and especially I was really intrigued about your hero's journey in Algonquin. I think that
Yeah.
that sounds so cool. So maybe you can kind of go into that a bit and just give us a little, perspective, your perspective on that, the
Hmm.
masculinity. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the when I was becoming the Wim Hof Method instructor, and I had this emotional breakthrough, and I released all this grief. And then, a few months after that, I was on an ayahuasca journey. And again, I just went into the realm of grief, and I grieved everything in my life. I just sort of flowed through the stream of time backwards and grieved everything. The loss of pets and grandparents and lost loves in high school and broken toys as a child, all the stuff I was supposed to grieve and I was never allowed to. I
Mm,
processed all of this and just went back through my life and grieved. And then I realized that, I'm not alone. We don't
exactly.
grieve as men because we're
Mhm.
not allowed to. Big boys
Yeah.
don't cry.
Yeah.
And that's what's driving so much pain with men. The suicide rates for men are 4 times higher than for women. Um, Alcoholism, drug use, way higher because we're in such pain. Um, and likewise, I work with both men and women in the healing realms. I guide people on their healing journey. With
Yeah.
women aren't allowed to be angry. They have to be the nice
Okay.
girl, right? Little girls aren't allowed to be angry. So
Yeah.
that's their big block. Women are blocked. Men, big boys don't cry. We have this huge block, and in the hierarchy of emotions, when you look at the energy states of them, grief is at the top. So if you got this big block of grief and you're not going to process your grief, you can't get to all these other emotional states until
Yeah.
it bursts. So you just push it down, and finally just bursts with rage comes out, and you have these big fits of anger, and you push it all back down again. But that's what men do all the time. And in those states of rage or trying to suppress those feelings, we get into drugs and alcohol and all that kind of stuff. So I had this moment in my ayahuasca journey that it's really important for me to tell men what happened to me and
Yeah.
to share my
Exactly.
story.
Yeah.
And so I started telling people, I started telling my story, and I've got involved in telling my story with different groups of men, and in the Wim Hof Method workshop, and in different podcasts. I would talk to people about why I was in pain. Um, and then it circled back to Asher in Australia, who was starting this men's group based on the mythopoetic men's movement, which was sort of brought to life by Robert Bly of the Minnesota men's movement in the late 80s, early 90s. Um, and it's all about telling the story. It was all about telling the story. But that's what I'm doing. I'm telling my story, not knowing that the need for me to tell my story was me healing myself. And that story, you don't have the
Hmm.
same history as me, but you have the same pain. You can relate. And so, me
Yeah.
releasing my story, my pain in my words will resonate in you so that you can feel your pain and allow yourself to speak your truth.
Wow.
And so, going deeper into that, I got more into all the stuff that we do at the Fifth Direction. We tell myths, all these ancient myths from all the civilizations of the world
We've
for
kind of lost that. The
thousands. Yeah,
storytelling where we've kind of lost
yeah.
that.
Which
Yeah.
is sad. Humans are thought of as the tool makers. We're not. We're the storyteller. That's what we
Hmm.
do. We tell the story. We tell the story of us. We tell the story of our people. We tell the story of our land. That's what we are. We are storytellers. No other animal tells stories. Lots of animals make tools, right? We're the storyteller. That's what we do. And in these ancient myths, and they're all similar from all these different cultures. They have different names and different monsters, but it's the same struggle.
The hero's
Same.
journey.
It's
It's
the
the same.
hero's journey,
The
right?
climax, the
Yeah,
abyss, all
yeah.
that. Yeah.
It's the call to action. It's the
Yep.
descent into the battle, and then it's the return. Happens over and over again. And that story is within us as well. Our truth, when we tell our story, is the same thing as that call to action, is descent in the darkness. And when we're doing that healing, sometimes we sit in that darkness for a very long time. It's not an afternoon meditation. You go into the
Mhm.
shadow and you stay there, digging around in the dirt, scratching around until your fingers bleed. And you keep going and you keep going and you keep going until finally you dig deep enough into that darkness and the light starts to shine through. That's where the healing is. It's hard work. We can't do it alone. We have to do it with our
Yeah.
brothers. And so by telling these stories and using the archetypes of in the myths of the heroes and the hero's journey, the hero, a lot of people misunderstand even what the hero is. The hero is an immature man. That's what the hero is. The hero is called to action and he fights the monsters. He doesn't return a hero. He returns as the warrior. And that's what we're missing in our society. There's no warriors. Warriors fight for the greater good. They don't want
Yeah.
to be recognized for their fight.
No.
They want to fight for the greater good.
Yeah.
We have a hero worship complex in the Western world. You can probably think of a couple politicians that come to mind, right? They want to be recognized for who they are, what they are. They want to be worshipped for all the great
Mm.
things that they're doing, whether they're great things or not. That's what
Yeah.
happens, right? And that's just an immature man.
Wow.
That's what that is. And then we've given it names of toxic masculinity and all that stuff. It's just immaturity
Yeah.
because we are not allowed to mature as men in our society. We don't have that rite of passage anymore. We don't move into
Yeah.
manhood.
Yeah.
We move into overgrown boys,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
And we don't step into our true power. And we can't until we heal the parts of us that's holding us back into that boyhood.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we see that, I see that all the time with my clients. Um, when we grow up and we're adults, we finish school, we have our jobs, and we're looking for a mate.
Yeah.
We marry our parents. I mean, everybody does. It's almost it's cliche, It's Freud who says, boys marry the moms, girls marry the fathers. We don't. We marry a combination of our parents because that's what's normal for us, and then we
Yeah.
project the pain of our wounded child onto our partner, and so she
Wow.
treats us like that boy, and she emasculates us into the state of boyhood again, and
Yeah.
that's where we stay.
And you got to heal it.
And you got to heal it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have
Yeah.
to heal it.
Yeah.
And you only heal it by doing that work, by, and you do. And a lot of us, we hear that call at various points in our life. We hear the call.
Yeah.
The first one is it's kind of at the decade mark. The first one is when we turn 30 for men. We've finished school, we're in our careers, we're building it. And you get to 30 and think, I'm not the rock star.
What the heck am I doing?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was promised the world, and all I have is a mortgage, right?
Exactly.
And is that first kick in the balls, and like,
Yeah.
life isn't what I was told.
Yeah.
And then we kind of go into a bit of a funk, and then 30 is kind of okay. Well, I got a career, I'm building up, and then you get to 40 and you realize that you're not happy in your career,
Incredible. That's
and then you get
crazy.
to 50, and if you make it to 50, it's usually in the 40s, sort of late 40s, early 50s is where a lot of men have this awakening. I applaud young men who are like in their 20s doing the work.
Yeah.
Damn, we need more men like that.
Hmm.
But it's usually, men get to the late 40s, early 50s, and they think, what am I doing? What have I
Crazy.
done? And they're
Which
just
is a good
standing
opportunity,
backwards. Yeah.
right?
And they're just standing backwards looking at their life, going, it's all over. No, you're going to live to be 100. It's half
Yeah.
over. Turn around. Let's get going.
Exactly.
So, um, the hero's journey that I guide both a men's exclusive trip, and then we also do an open for men and women, because the work's the work. There's certain
Exactly.
things that happen on the men's trip. We talk about some men's stuff, but we all have to do the work. And
Yeah.
so it's a 4-day backpacking trip or canoe trip. In the canoe trip, we connect a little bit more with play, but in the backpacking trip, it is the descent. It gets
Wow.
hard. We gather. The first day is a gathering. It's all wrapped in ceremony. We have a fire ceremony. We work with tobacco in the form of hape, which is a powdered tobacco, which helps us connect to spirit. We invite in our guides, our spirit guides, our ancestors. I tell stories around the fire. The ancient myths are shared. And then the next day we have a long day of backpacking. A long, long day of backpacking. And
Wow.
if anybody has gone backpacking before, after a long day of backpacking, you're done. You're feeling pretty broken, and you just go
Yeah.
to those dark places. All the darkness is welling up inside of you, especially when it's already framed, and that's where you're going to go.
Hmm.
And then on our third day is the unburdening. And we work with transformational medicines to go into a heart space to really access love and kindness and compassion for ourselves and for our brothers that we're on this journey with. And we begin to share our stories to ourselves, to each other as we move through the woods and release the pain, the burden that we're holding. And then we come together at the end and we share that story around the fire again and release. And it's everyone who has done this um, has admitted that it's 20 years of therapy done in an afternoon. It's
Wow.
just you blast through everything, you get to the core of it, and you
Hmm.
release. You let that little boy go. He's free at last. He can go and play in the park instead of
Yeah.
sitting in a closet scared inside your heart. It's so moving and so powerful.
Wow.
And then we hike out on
Crazy.
day 4. Yeah, yeah,
Crazy. Yeah. So
it's
like,
powerful.
okay. So how's it different in nature? Okay. Because I know, a lot of us, we live in the city, big city or that sort of thing with, roads and cars and concrete.
Mhm.
How is it different in like the middle of nature where, you can look up and you see the stars at night or, you
Yeah,
feel the fresh air of the trees. Like, what does that do to us? Because I know a lot of us are disconnected from nature.
yeah. What's actually happened is we are disconnected because we're in the city. We've only been living in cities for a tiny fraction of humanity's history. This is not normal living in the city. I'm living in a high rise in Toronto. This is not normal
Yeah. Your
at
feet are way above
all.
the ground,
Yeah, I'm
opposite of
nowhere
grounding.
near the
Yeah.
ground. There's no
Yeah.
electrons here at all.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's what's not normal. So the disconnect
Yeah.
is here. This is the disconnect, but our disconnect has become normal for us. It's normal to be disconnected. It's normal to be in a dysfunctional relationship. It's normal to be sad. It's
Mhm.
normal to be drinking all the time, right?
Yeah.
That's not normal.
Yeah.
When we go out into the woods, there's an intention behind it. We've left it behind. We've left our life behind us.
Yeah.
And there's the physical aspect of, we walk a path. Our healing is a path. And, the metaphor is quite clear. We're actually hiking on a path when we're doing this. It's quite real. There's a real process involved. So you start to ruminate on these things. And because I've had a spiritual awakening, and a big part of the healing process with the mind, body, heart, spirit is that spirit is so very important. And I'm not
Hmm.
talking about religion, not by any means. I'm not talking about a belief in
Yeah.
God. I'm talking about a spiritual connection to something. When we're
Hmm.
in the woods and we invite in the energies, and I give them names because that resonates with me, and that resonates into you, and it creates your own story.
Hmm.
The wilderness is a character in our myth. It speaks to us. There's an energy there. It helps us to release whatever we're doing. And the wilderness for me, I grew up in the countryside in Owen Sound, out in the country. I played in the woods my whole life. It was always home to me. My home
Hmm.
wasn't my home. My home was the dangerous place. Being in the woods was the home. And I am so at home when I'm in the woods. I could just
Wow.
stay there, right?
Yeah.
So that's what the wilderness plays. It is this nurturing, and it's connection to Mother Earth,
Yeah.
and it's reconnecting to that divine Mother, and it's also
Yeah.
connecting to, because that energy that flows up from the earth into us, that is the flow of your sacred feminine as well, from root
Hmm.
to heart. Our sacred masculine descends from Father Sky down from the crown to the heart, and our sacred masculine feminine comes together in our heart. It's that feminine is the creative, wild creative flow, and our masculine is the container of that. Our strong masculine body is the container of that. And we
Yeah.
see that represented in nature. And there's a spot that we go on these hikes actually, where we stand on a little footbridge over a creek.
Hmm.
And we stand there, and I point out that this is the masculine and feminine. This little creek, this movement of water, that is the wild, creative, chaotic feminine that flows through us. The riverbanks are the masculine,
Yeah,
containing it.
exactly. Container. Yeah.
It is the container. And that river flows forever. It's infinite, right? It flows to the ocean eventually, right? It's all
Yeah.
infinite. The riverbanks are infinite with it.
Wow. Crazy.
Mhm.
Crazy, crazy. Okay, cool. So yeah, we got a couple minutes left here. I just want to, kind of, if people want to like find you or go on, dive deeper into like the Wim Hof method or any of these Algonquin excursions you have with the hero's journey, where can they find you? If you want to just give people a little like call to action, where can they go? What can they do to kind of get more involved in what you got going on?
Yeah, we are Breathing in Nature. That is the name of my company, Breathing in Nature, breathinginnature.com, all one word. And on all the socials, it's Breathing in Nature. That's where you
Okay.
find me. I do most of my stuff on Instagram, but there's
Okay.
TikTok, Facebook, and then the webpage, which is painfully slow right now. It's being updated. So sorry
It's
if you get there. If,
okay.
you, if you're there before it's updated, it's kind of slow, but it's going to be better. So that's where you can find us. And then we do, and a big thing of what we do is community. It's
Yeah.
so important. We heal in relation to others. You
Yeah.
only see yourself reflected in the eyes of the person in your community.
Yeah.
It's so important to be with others. So we have a lot of community stuff that we do. And every Saturday here in Toronto, we have our Wim
Yeah.
Hof Method meetup down at the beach at
Yep.
9 a.m.
We
Yep.
we connected there. It was pretty. I
Yep.
was awesome. I got to tell you guys, it was incredible. It was amazing. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it is. And that community is unbelievable. We were all strangers until the
yeah.
pandemic, right? And then more and more
Wow.
people, everybody lost their community. That was the great gift. I always see
Yes.
gifts in all these bad things that happen in the world. I see the gift of it. And the gift of the
Hmm.
pandemic was people realizing that they have no community. They
Wow.
lost the one remnant of community they had, which was their work friends, which are people you can kind of tolerate going for a coffee with. That's
Yeah.
not community to me.
No.
And so
No.
people were coming out in droves. They were coming out to this beach meetup, the Wim Hof method, and doing breath work together. And when you do that together, there is something magic happens when you breathe with people. And then we go into the icy waters of Lake Ontario year round, every Saturday, 9 a.m. All the details are on the webpage,
Awesome.
breathinginnature.com. And then in the warmer months, we have yoga in High Park. And then we do random stuff all the time.
Awesome.
And then the online breath class 3 times a week. Join the breath class. It's free to join. It's a pay what you want kind of thing. 3 times a week. It's called the Stoic Breath. The Stoicism is a big part of my journey and teaching people about Stoicism.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, I think we're almost out of time here, but thank you so much, Steve. And yeah, thank you guys. If you want to go check out the content on Breathing with Nature, and yeah, thank you so much for joining us. That was an awesome conversation.
Thank you.
All
My
right.
pleasure.